Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, episode 188.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers and enthusiasts who are looking to take their games to new heights. Dedicated to custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to sharing useful information on professional club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice techniques. I create exceptional golf clubs. You shoot lower scores. 3 weeks ago, I noted that why did I wait so long about doing an interview with 25-plus year golf shaft designer and good friend Robin Arthur, creator of the Excalibur golf shaft line. We had a few bumps in the road to get this interview done, but I think it was well worth it. You'll hear how Robin created the Grafaloy Pro Lite golf shaft, and this shaft has more wins on the PGA Tour than any other golf shaft. And also he'll share his perspectives on how golf shafts are designed and on the truth about the golf shafts being marketed to golfers. Enjoy this fascinating interview with Robin Arthur from Excalibur Golf Shafts.
Taking your game to new heights. www.gameimprovementgolf.com.
Hello, this is Tony Wright with episode 188 of the Golf Improvement Podcast. And today I'm excited to get you to hear from Robin Arthur, who has had a successful 25-plus year career in designing, testing, manufacturing, and marketing golf shafts. His shafts, the Grafaloy Pro Lite, has had more than 312 tour wins, more than any other golf shaft. His golf club shaft company is Excalibur Golf Shafts, and he tells the truth about anything related to golf shafts. And boy, I think we got this night right now, Robin, but what a trip we've had the last week or two, and even just now. So,
no worries, Tony. We finally made it.
Oh, my gosh. I got it all worked out.
Glad to be here.
So let's start out talking a little bit about your story and how you got into the world of designing and creating golf shafts.
Well, it's funny. I graduated from Yale with 3 degrees, one in engineering, one in business, and one in philosophy, which was really fun, stimulating, hard.
Yeah.
And after a year back home in West Virginia, I moved to San Diego. And after playing for a year out there, I got into the real world and got a job as one of the first engineers they hired for their aerospace program. And that was pretty exciting because at that time, there's really only 3 engineers. It was myself, responsible for manufacturing and helping the design guys that worked on a lot of different designs, not just composites. Neil Haas, who's now with True Temper, I actually brought him into Grafaloy. And Don Bone, Neil was responsible for all the planning, and Don Bone was responsible for the quality control, QA/QC, and it was just us 3. And Don's now with Titleist, Neil's now with True Temper, and I'm the guy trying to build a small little company up to make it kind of like the next Grafaloy. So it's been quite a thing. So after being with GD, it was funny. A headhunter called me up out of the blue and asked me if I wanted to get back into sporting goods, back into sports. And I was like, I thought he wanted me to. At the time, I was actually playing in a Laker development league, and John, he said, no, dummy. He goes, no. I was wondering if you had ever thought about getting into the game of golf. I'm like, as how? He sold as the head engineer, as the VP of engineering and product development. I go, John, it's just amazing that you're just asking me that. I've just started hitting the golf ball around 6 months ago, and I'm in love with it. And I'm an athlete, so
Wow.
I'm putting in the same kind of fervor that I put into football, basketball, track, and baseball, growing up and in college. And I'm doing the same thing with golf, and I'm getting good at it pretty quick. So I got an interview with Grapholoy, Bill Gerhardt, who was a Harvard puke. And excuse me, but that's the way it is between Yale and Harvard.
Yeah.
and ended up getting the job. And Bill and I working together, we turned a little $250,000 company into about a $30 million company and sold it, and made a little bit of coin and moved on. So it was quite a ride. And the Grapholoy, I came into the Grapholoy knowing about design and seeing how archaic their designs were. I mean, they were designing shafts with one great big plus or minus 45 degree sandwich structure, which means that's what gives the torsional distribution, not torque. That's crazy.
Yeah.
The torsional distribution to a golf shaft, and two great big flags, 4 inches by 2 inches, 48 inches long, and to cut down to a 46-inch shaft. And what they were doing is they were basically making an extra stiff shaft and sanding it from extra stiff to an X, then sanding it more to an S, sanding it more to an R, sanding it more to an A, sanding it more to an L. And I'm looking at this going, what are you guys doing? So after I learned the golf industry, after like 6 months, Bill, I went to Golf Works and did their school down there. I went to see Tom Wishon, who was at the first one was Golf Smith. Went to Golf Dynacraft to
Right.
see Tom Wishon when he was there. I went over to Golf Works and met those guys, and so I got a crash course in the industry itself and club making, and a little bit about fitting especially from Tom. Tom has done more for fitting in this industry than everybody put together, I think.
Yeah.
And he should get more recognition for it, but it is what it is. The people who know that Tom is the man. Yeah, and kind of like, he's the guru there. I'm kind of been called many, many, many times the guru of shaft design, but whether those things fit or not, I don't know. But Tom deserves all the credit in the world, and that's what got me started.
That's
in
amazing.
this golf industry.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, what are some of the things that you think are the most important characteristics of golf shafts that they need to have so golfers can play their best? And, maybe a little bit too about how do you start to create something new and then sort of move it toward the market?
Well, one of the things that this industry had no idea about when I came into the industry, nobody, is it's simple beam theory. And in mechanical engineering, it's called simple beam theory. And when you're building composite structures for an F-15 fighter, if you're building something for the space shuttle, if you're building something for the Atlas Centaur program, something that's carrying, mega expensive payloads or especially people, besides the safety, the safety factors you have to design into, you have to understand what the distribution of all the mechanical properties are in whatever parts you're making, be it a beam, be it an antenna, be it whatever, because you have to know what the distributional mechanics are. And it's not just, obviously it's not its weight, it's stiffness, it's in some cases it's torsional, and if it's a rod of some type. But when I came into the industry, no one even thought about that, and they were still using the old multi method of anchoring a shaft and hanging a weight on it, and boy, if it bent this much, it was a stiff, and it bent a whole lot more, it was an L. But what that methodology never told you is why it was bending that way. It was, and to me, I was learning all this stuff, and I was just scratching my head going, really? Really? How do you know that shaft is different from this shaft? So it's an interesting story. Prince owned Grapholoy, and I was only in the industry probably about a year or so when I started, totally redoing the designs. But I was back in Princeton at Prince, and I had some things to do with the engineers there, and some things that me and Bill had to do, and was taken through their lab, and they were doing basically zone deflections on the hoops of tennis rackets. And for example, they knew that, and I may get the names wrong and what their preferences were. They knew that McEnroe, for example, with his violent swing, needed the top end of his racket to be very stiff. And they knew Jimmy Connors, wanted his a different way. They knew Lindell wanted his a different way, Borg, he wanted his a different way. So they learned to dial in the stiffness distribution across the hoop of a shaft, hoop of a tennis racket. And I'm looking at that going, oh my God, that's simple beam theory. I mean, that's simple, mechanical engineering as a sophomore, as a junior. That's where you learn that. And I asked him, I go, guys, can you rig this up? Do you have any extra one of these machines? And, we got about 50 of them. Can you rig one up to hold a golf shaft such that it wouldn't rotate? I can have it in a single plane. He said, oh yeah. So they rigged it up. And at the time, Ely Callaway was frustrated, and Helmstetter, good old Dick Helmstetter, was frustrated with how the shafts that were coming out with the Great Big Bertha, the heavy shafts were working. And I was trying to develop a shaft from Grafaloy, the first lightweight shaft that the tour players could use in the Great Big Bertha. Now, the problem with the Great Big Bertha it wasn't a problem. The Great Big Bertha was revolutionary in its size. It was made from this new material called titanium. Wow.
Yeah,
titanium.
right.
They just found, what the heck? But it was oversized. I mean, it was big. And it was beautiful design. It was revolutionary. What the engineers got wrong is they got the center of gravity, the mass distribution of properties of the Great Big Bertha was great for a 12 to 25 handicapper, but the CG was low and way far back. So it was great for them because those kind of players need, high ball flight, high spin to maximize their distance. Well, the pros don't need that. So, for example, Jim Dent, who was leading the regular tour in driving distance, he went out to the senior tour, and he was hitting, the normal loft out there at that time was between 8 and 9 degrees. Jim got down to where he was getting paid to hit the Great Big Bertha, and he was hitting a 5 degree, wow. And he was begging Helmstetter for a 4 degree.
Huh.
Now, you guys know about roll and bulge. By the time you get down to 5 and 4 degree, there is no roll and bulge. There is no forgiveness. Absolutely, you're hitting off a piece of marble or whatever.
Yeah.
So in comes, I wasn't there yet. I was, Rick Nichols, our tour rep, was how you doing? I brought that technology back from Princeton, and I'd already passed Callaway's durability test, so I knew how to do that. That took me about 6 months to learn how to do that, because I was, I didn't know the forces being applied with a hosel-less head. That's a whole lot more forces applied to that tip of the shaft. So they had a very, very rigid stiffness requirement, durability requirement. And so I took a look at the shafts that are out on tour, the heavy shafts. That was I think the Aldila Gold was a 75-gram shaft out there. One of the True Temper shafts. I'm drawing a blank on its name. The purple one. I'll think of it here in a second. So I took those shafts and ran them across Princeton's machine, and I went, wow. And I took some of our shafts, some of the competitor shafts I already looked at, and I went, oh wow. Everybody says these are S's, but these are completely different shafts. And I took my my prototype shaft and ran mine through there. And the first thing that popped in my mind, first thing that popped out number-wise, was how weak the bottom 16 inches of my prototype was. They were working in a Great Big Bertha, but they were actually hitting them too low, way too low. So because it was like, the bottom of that shaft was like a L-flex. Hell, I didn't know. I had no way to measure it up to that point. So I took the numbers off the two premier shafts on tour at the time, and I stiffened up the Pro Light way beyond those. In today's vernacular, you'd probably, in zone frequency terms, you'd probably say at the 11-inch mark, they were probably somewhere between 850 and 900.
Yeah, super stiff, right?
They were stiff. Well, I went a factor up from there. I made the Pro Light between 980 and you couldn't measure it, and it was 64 grams. And there's never been a shaft like that before. So, so I was doing iterations every day, every night, getting the test results. Dave, what was Dave's last name? My right hand man. He would go out and hit him. He played golf for San Diego State. I think he was the captain. Unbelievably great swing. He actually played in the whatever they call it, the San Diego tournament at the time. Dave went out, and we'd been testing for a month. Dave went out, and on the first swing, we looked at the ball flight because Dave was probably swinging 105 to 109 miles an hour. And the very first swing, he hit it, and we looked at the ball flight. He looked at me, and I looked at him, and he goes, "No way." I go, hit another one. And hit another one. He just roped it, absolutely roped it. Perfect trajectory, perfect pro trajectory. I go, okay, now try to move it. And he moved it right to left. He moved it left to right. And he turned to me and he said, and I quote, "What the hell did you do? But I don't know what you did, but you did it." And we both just started jumping up and down and high-fiving each other. And we took it back. And I bet it wasn't a month later when we had established but actually we hadn't established cosmetics yet. We went to the senior tournament in Ojai, and one of the first people we let hit was Jim Dent. And I already met Jim through Rick Nichols, and he looks at me, he goes, "Man, I've heard you were working on this. I hope you did it." I go, you're gonna be the now what I say, I said something like, "Proof of the pudding's eating proof of the pudding's in eating, Mr. Dent. Let's see what happens." And he hit it with a 5 degree, and one shot, he turned around and looked at me because he knew right then, because that went low. He turned around, looked at me, and smiled real big, and came up and gave me a bear hug and picked me up off the ground. Me and Rick looked at each other and knew we were going to change the industry.
Yeah.
And that Jim went from a 5 back up to a 6 or back up to a 7 degree or 8 degree, whatever it was. And that evening, when the Pro Light was born in Ojai, California, at the Ojai at the senior and super senior tournament up there. And Rick and Dave, what was Dave's last name from Callaway? We went out to dinner, and we were sitting around mulling over names for it, and we were going back and forth. And I go, you know what? It's for the pros. It's going to be the lightest shaft out there. Pro. What about Pro Light? And they looked at me, and boom, it started. That's the whole story.
Wow. Well, now, so driver shafts have come a little bit of ways since then. Talk a little bit.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people have copied my technology.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the differences in driver shafts for different type of golfers. Some that obviously the tour guys release different than, people that don't have as great a swing and things like that. And some of the defining characteristics of the shafts that make some work for some and some work better for others.
Well, again, it gets back to distribution of stiffness. It gets back to distribution of weight. People don't understand distribution of torsional, but I can measure it. It's just an understanding of what those kind of players need. The better players, the pros, they definitely need the bottom 16 inches on a lot stiffer side of the equation than does the 10 and 15 and above handicaps. Simple as that. Those guys need something a little bit softer at the tip, maybe even softer all the way through the shaft. So it's one of those things where that's where fitting comes in. And that's where, when working with fitters, I'm really good at explaining, what the stiffness distribution of those shafts are so they would understand. And over the years, we just, got an understanding of what shaft fits what kind of player profile. And it all starts really back from, the distribution of properties. It really does. I mean, back when I was, one of the things that used to drive me nuts, Tony, is these terms called flex point and kick point. And I was amazed that there was this magical, place on a golf shaft that was, maximum of 2 inches. Tom and Jeff Summit, when they were at Dynacraft, they proved this over testing over 800 shafts, that if you would put them in compression, flex point, or you'd put a weight on the end, and that's kick point. Those apex of those curves only varied in graphite shafts about 1.5 inches. If you included steel driver shafts, it made it shot up to almost 2 inches. And I'm looking at that data going, how the heck could a magical point on a shaft determine flight for every person in the world? And so I debunked that real quick and started talking about distribution of properties. And it's as simple as that. I mean, a lady couldn't use, even if it was an L-flex shaft, most, little old ladies, they're not going to be able to use a shaft that's also very, very stiff at the tip. They need some flexibility, throughout the shaft so they can actually load the dang thing, So, and that's one of the things I even did with the Classic 5 series. Now it's the RT5. Is I knew there was the people out there, even S-Flex swingers, who didn't load the shaft up enough. They just simply they just didn't load the shaft up enough. So on the 5 series, Classic 5 series, throughout the years, what I did is I made the perfect example of the stiffness distribution. I made the upper part of that shaft at least a flex or a flex and a half weaker than what an R-Flex or an S-Flex shaft would be. But I made the bottom 16 inches very stiff. So what was happening with, not pro-light stiff, but stiff, most of the 65-gram shafts out there in those days were around 850 with zone frequency at 11 inches. So I was basically giving people, it's almost like the NitroFlex. Matter of fact, it's a lot like the NitroFlex, which is another revolutionary design. Let's get to that here in a second.
Yeah.
I just made the top end of the shaft very flexible, but I made the bottom very, a lot stiffer than normal, such that they could get the advantage of loading up the shaft, but also have the advantage of the bottom end not going off center, staying with them.
I think that's something that's a lot different. That's something that's a lot different about your shafts than others, I think. I notice when I profile them that's that way, right?
Yeah, well, that's just on that one series, yeah. And that was done for a specific, like you're asking for specific specific profiles of a golfer I went after, and that was for those golfers who really were so smooth, but maybe could generate a little bit club head speed, but they just weren't loading the shaft up. And unfortunately, with all the designs I've had, that kind of got lost in the shuffle. But I'll tell you what, all the people that's ever hit that shaft, they rave about it. So that's been pretty cool.
Yeah. Now, fairway wood shafts are a little bit different, right? And talk about,
right.
And obviously the heads are different. The heads are smaller, of course, but they're also a lot heavier.
Right.
But the way people hit them are different. You hit them off the deck, you might be hitting down, all that kind of stuff.
No doubt.
So what are the big differences there contrasting to driver shafts?
Well, here's the gig that always, another thing in this industry used to drives me nuts, is a company will do 90% of their testing on a wood shaft in their driver heads, or whomever's driver's heads, including the big boys. And if it works in a driver's shaft, then conventional thinking was, tip it an inch for a 3-wood, and it'll be a 3-wood shaft. Well, if I'm gonna do all the testing for a shaft in one realm, there's no way I'm going to assume that it's going to work in another realm, in a 3-wood or a 5-wood on down. So I started designing shafts and testing specifically for fairway woods and all the different ways of swinging a fairway wood shaft. I mean, you swing it off the tee, you hit down on it, you try to scoop it. I mean, it's nothing like trying to get a positive attack angle with a driver. the fairways used, in a few different other ways. And that's why I started designing and testing again fairway woods. And I came up with some designs that I thought would work in the regular series, the Everyman's series type, like the classics, and the pro series, and then even in the Superlight series. And you know what? It worked. It worked.
Yeah.
So we stuck with it. And I can't remember. I think I was only Grafalloy and then the Excaliburs. I think we were one of the only 2 shaft companies that ever even put out a fairway wood. Now, there might have been another one, but like back in the 90s when there was shaft companies, on every other corner, I think we were the only one that had fairway woods. And we ended up getting a bunch of those in play on the tour when Rick was around, Rick Nichols.
Yeah.
So
now I assume that hybrids then become, just sort of the natural extension, or is there something even a little bit different about hybrid shafts?
It's the same story with the hybrids. Hybrids, typically, even the hybrid shafts that a lot of people have put out there, they're simply an inch or 2 extension of whatever their iron is. Simple as that. And hybrids are used like irons, but hybrids are also used off the tee. So I started designing and testing shafts specifically for hybrids. And all the hybrid shafts out there, they were good ones. I'm never going to put anybody else's shafts down.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of great shafts that I've been, in my competitors, and I'm proud of their work. But sometimes, I don't think they take the extra steps of really testing and verifying if these shafts are really good and who they're good for.
Yeah. Well, one of the fun topics today is the rapid taper iron shafts, and you obviously make some very interesting claims about that shaft that people just tend to swing them faster, right? I get
right.
What, 2 to 4 or 5 more miles an hour ball speed.
Right.
What was the start of that? What led you to think that something like, without maybe divulging,
you ain't gonna believe it. You ain't gonna believe it. I've told this story so many times, and once again, I'm the guy who says the truth. Oh, Robin, you're a guru. You're this and that, and these rapid tapers or something. My God, it only took me 3.5 years to develop them. The idea came, I swear, from watching Zorro, the movie Zorro.
Really?
Anthony Hopkins. Anthony Hopkins, I swear, we're watching Anthony Hopkins and Tony Banderas. And I wasn't really watching that movie for them. I wanted to see Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Well, me too.
Catherine Zeta-Jones to me was oh my God, she was what was the old time actress that the
Gina Lollobrigida?
No, she was Richard Burton's girlfriend.
Oh,
wife.
Yeah, come on.
Elizabeth Taylor.
Elizabeth Taylor. Oh, yeah.
Elizabeth Taylor. She was already Elizabeth Taylor.
Yeah.
I mean, just striking and good person. And so I'm watching when old Zorro is teaching young Zorro about how to use a whip, and which was a funny part. But it got me thinking. I went, wait a minute. A whip is like a golf club. I mean, it has a comfortable upper end that's braided. And it's the same OD, or however they braid it. Sometimes it's square up there, but it's the same OD for a while. And then it tapers down quickly to a long braided string, long braided part with some type of weight on it, and when they're fighting, it's, maybe it has spikes on it or little balls, or it may have just, a lot of heavier leather down there. And that's what causes, that whip action. So I'm thinking about that, and I went, wait a minute, that's Einsteinian, that's Newtonian, that's Einsteinian physics. That's E equals m squared going to kinetic energy, going to stored energy. That's works just like a golf shaft. And I started thinking, because a golf shaft, the only difference was a golf shaft is a gradual taper all the way down.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, what if? And then I'm telling you, Tony, I worked on so many designs. The problem was it was very tough to flag roll these guys. And then when I finally found a company that was doing filament winding, a company called Neofiber, they're still my supplier. They also do the steel fibers.
Yeah.
Great company. Thomas Chow, I can't say enough about Thomas Chow as the owner. He's become a dear, dear friend over the years. And I finally, this I'm not a guru, but this guru dingle, I don't know, decided, there's got to be a relationship where that taper's got to be to optimize the release of that potential energy such that it can get the acceleration equals MC squared. Kinetic energy is a little different. That's half equals half MC squared. So half mass, remember that.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking at that and I went, wait a minute, what am I doing? Trying to keep, designing 41-inch shafts. I asked Neofiber to give me two designs. One was 48.5 inches, and the other one was 47 inches for a 41-inch shaft. And on the 48.5-inch design, after testing, we finally figured out that if we took 5 inches off the tip of that shaft and to cut it to length from the butt, it performed like a miracle. It's just the same thing as when Dave hit the Pro Light for the first time. First time I got those things out there in better players' hands. I always start with better players, but I always test with, middle and higher handicaps as well. The first time I put that into some better players' hands, they did the same thing. They would turn around, we'd look at the launch monitor. I was using a quad at the time, and I'm still in. And they would look at the numbers, look at me, and go, what the hell is this? I know it looks different, but what did you do? I go, just hit it.
Yeah.
And in testing, and I was testing with, some better players. In testing, we probably had 80+% people gaining 2 to 5 mile an hour on their 6 irons. 6 irons cut at 38 inches, half inch over steel, like the standard was or is, or I don't know, I'm still confused about that, but it was half inch over. It's just for swing weight purposes. And believe me, a half inch over is not going to give you any increase in distance. And we were looking at the numbers, and I had a guy, his name was Harrison Tinsley. He was a sophomore. He was at San Diego State University. He was a sophomore. And Harrison was hitting C-tapers, 135 gram shafts.
Oh, yeah, right.
And he had a 75 gram shaft that he was testing that he hit for me on the quad. And he hit his first shaft, hit his first shot on a 6 iron. He looks at the quad, looks at me, and he just shook his head. He hit another one, and then another one. He goes, there's something wrong with your machine. I'm like, what? He goes, Robin, I've never hit a 6 iron 255 yards. Harrison was swinging around 129 to 131. His club head speed was like 185 plus. And he was just ripping this thing out there. And then I asked him, I go, Harrison, don't hold it, in the middle of the club, but just waggle it. Tell me how much you think that club or that shaft weighs. I go, you're hitting your steels right now. Those are heavy. Those are heavy poles, man. Those are around 130 grams by the time you cut it down, 125, 120, high 20s when you cut it down to a 6 iron. He goes, I don't know. He waggled it and goes, I don't know, 105 or so. I go, uh-uh. He goes, really? He goes, it's got to weigh 100. I go, uh-uh. He goes, 95? I go, uh-uh. He's looking at me like, what am I on a game show?
Yeah, right.
and I go, Harrison, that shaft is at 41 inches, started at 75 grams. By the time I cut it down for 6 iron, it's just right above 70 grams. He looked at me like I was Medusa and I had snakes coming out of my hair. Yeah. He goes, no way. He goes, Robin, I'd never been able to hit a graphite iron shaft that I liked, much less one this light. I go, hit it a couple more times. Let's see what happens. I go, I'll try to move the ball. And he was doing everything he wanted with it. And so he looks at me. I go, Harrison, I got a question for you. And this is when I really knew. Would you game that? He goes, well, not in my irons, but now that I know that it's light, but in my I don't hit a hybrid, but maybe in a driving iron or in my longer irons, damn right I would. And that was, I mean, I don't know where Harrison is now in the pecking order. He's got to be playing on some of the development league tours. But right then, I knew I had something special. I knew I had something that could, like the pro, could change the game.
Yeah, neat. Well, I got 3 of them now. I need the 85R, by the way, right? And so hopefully you guys are going to get those. that must be the sweet spot. That must be the sweet spot club for so many people, I guess, is why you don't have them right now, right?
Well, what's happening is, and this is an interesting story. When I came out with the Rapid Tapers and the Exclusives and the Avalon Woods, I was all excited to be using ion coating. Now, a lot of people have used some type of plating on irons, and UST did a good job with their iron shafts. I'm drawing a blank on their names. But a lot of times people would use plating, and they'd make them look like steel, and they'd make them look like a Mattel toy, and I didn't want that. So I helped develop this ion plating such that I didn't help develop it. I gave them the incentive or the vision of how I wanted to look. Something that was more of a gunmetal gray. Something that was brilliant, but as you went down into the dress position, it would fade away.
Yeah.
And so I used that on the Mystic Woods and the Avalon Woods. And I use it on the Mystic irons, and it's striking. It's striking. I use foil logos, and I used them on the Rapid Tapers too, because when I took them to the show pre-pandemic, everybody was going nuts on them. Everybody. Mark Timms at Cool Clubs, the guys were stopping by from Hiker's Paradise, for example, Josh Babbitt. I mean, everybody. There must have been 40 people because I didn't have a room, and I was just sitting outside the ICG room, and people were just coming up to me. Which was kind of flattering, but and everybody that looked at the cosmetics said, my God, these are the prettiest things I've ever seen. I go, what do you think about the Rapid Tapers? Oh, they're stunning. I go, yeah, but they're going to be more expensive. Oh, this industry will, it'll follow you. It'll follow you. Don't worry about it. They're beautiful. Well, here comes the pandemic. The industry kind of changed a little bit, and then comes the MMTs and some of the other irons that are out there, the Fuji's iron, and truthfully, these high-end fitters, because I didn't have the money to actually get all the exposure that the Mitsubishis and the Fujis of the world, that they had to get exposure for their shafts, and they hadn't died on the vine by no means, but sales haven't kept up with the capability of increasing. I would say right now it's probably somewhere around 70% of people who hit them are going to get an increase in club head speed just by changing out the shafts. It's not up there in the 85s or so like we thought it was going to be, maybe 65 to 70. But that's still
pretty darn good. Yeah.
No doubt, huh? For a 6-iron? Yeah. But the thing is, so what we're doing is probably in the May time frame, we're going to be reintroducing all the Rapid Tapers, including a Rapid Taper 105 that weighs 110 that is testing out with the better players like I've never seen an iron test out. And for the Southeast Asian market and for the slower swingers, well, right now we got in test a Rapid Taper 65-gram shaft. So we're going to have the whole gambit of weights covered. And unfortunately, there's no reason to order a whole bunch more 85Rs because pretty soon they're going to be outdated anyway. So we're going to come out we're working on cosmetics right now. We're going to come out with a really nice matte black finish, base coat.
Yeah. Some
simple cosmetics, cut the number of rings down, just make it really simple and classy.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about reintroducing the Griffin that I introduced at Golf Works on some of the pro shafts, that mythological bird lion. And these things are going to, I'm going to be able to take, $5-6 out of the cost of these things. So now the retail is going to go from $53 down to $49.99.
Wow.
Right in the middle, a little bit lower the pack. And the tiered customers and the distributors, they're going to be getting better prices than on the steel fibers and the MMTs and all these other things. So we're looking for, we're really looking for these new rapid tapers, the new approach to just really take these guys to another level and get the exposure. But sometimes prices was just holding you back. I listened to everybody, and honestly, I screwed up. I listened to everybody instead of going with my instinct, and my instinct was not to put the padding on there, but everybody wanted me to at the PGA show. So I still believe that our instinct is a little way that the Great Spirit is talking to you.
Yeah.
And every time I haven't followed that Great Spirit or my instinct, my first thoughts, I've been wrong 100%. 100% of the time. 100% of the time.
Oh my gosh.
I know. I think I should go left here, but no, let's try right. That is wrong.
Yeah.
Every time, Tony. Every time.
Yeah. Well, let's end with one of your favorite topics today, and or any other thoughts you have related to helping golfers. But
right.
The value of high cost golf shafts, and what your thoughts are on there. And I know you're very opinionated on that, but hey, you're here, right?
Right.
That's right.
Well, here's how that's kind of started. I left the golf industry to go to Vietnam. I've been doing charity work in Vietnam since the early 90s, late 80s. Just a small group out of San Diego. We're helping handicapped children. It's called AHAC, American Helping Asian Children, AHAC. And I went over there for a year, and I came back, and I was just poking my head around. And Britt Lindsay, God bless him, and Mark McCormick, God bless him, two good friends, and really, really stalwarts in the industry in their own right. I mean, just they've done an amazing job with their careers. I came back, and they wanted me. They were kind of tired of all the innuendos, and that's a good word, innuendos, that they were being forced to publish in their catalog and kind of advertise as things like, hell, back in the 90s, the first biggest bunch of malarkey was the use of boron. It was so much overdone, overplayed, didn't do anything except add to the cost of the shaft. Then fast forward to all kinds of things. Thin ply technology, I think that was Aldo or whomever. Gosh darn, that's been around for ages, and I started that in the golf industry. Nanotubes, there's a good one. There's a good one. Yeah. Nanotubes. Nanotubes, they put 25% nanotubes in the resin. The resin is 25% of a composite structure. So now if you look at the entire structure of the golf shaft, you're talking about what? 0.04%, 4%, less than 4%, 04%, whatever the numbers come out to be. And that is supposed to make them a lot more durable and hit the ball up farther. Okay. Good marketing department. Go. Right on. Good marketing.
Yeah.
So Britt and Mark had been trying to get me to come out with a new, with a new line. And I'm like, guys, I don't know what my hook's going to be. People know my name. Yeah, I've got a reputation, but I'm going to need something more than that. I don't have the money. I got a little bit of money that I can invest and do this, but I don't know what the hook is going to be. Besides, I don't know what the hook is going to be. And even at that point, didn't even mention me. One day, Rick Nichols called me up. He was at I think he was at the Hope or somewhere. He was out in Palm Desert, I with the Hope. It might have been the Hope. He called me up and goes, hey, it was like a Wednesday. He goes, I got a bet on you out here. And I went, what? Rick Nichols, and the Nichols family is the most wonderful family I've ever been around. But, they're very thrifty, let's say. And I went, Rick, you got a bet on me. He's like, yeah. I go, how much? I go, $50. I started beating the phone on the desk I was at. He goes, what is that noise? I go, I got a problem with the reception, Rick. I thought you said you bet $50. He goes, I did. I bet on you. I go, hold on for a second. Start doing it again. We started laughing. I go, what's the bet? He said, I'm betting three different people out here that you've got more tour wins with your designs than anybody in the history of golf. I went, Rick, I know we got a lot with the Pro Light and some of the derivatives of that, but the most of anybody? He goes, I've already got Stephanie working on it. She was our marketing manager at Grafaloy. He called me back up the next day and he said, guess what, buddy? I'm like, he had another name for me. I forgot. He goes, guess what? I'm like, what? He goes, I won my bet. I go, you did? I go, how many? He goes, she came up with 290, but I've already given her another 30 names that, or 30 tournaments that we won that she missed. So I know it's around 310, 312, 315 to 320. And I went, wow, gotta be kidding me. That's cool. I go, you know what's a good thing about that, Rick? He goes, what? I go, with that information and $1, I still can't get a cup of coffee at Starbucks, you know? So, but as soon as I hung up the phone, a little light bulb went off, and I went, oh, my Lord, I need to call Britt and Mark McCormick up. So I did, and I started relating the story. And I go, guys, I'm not usually like this, but I think the hook is me. And they're like, and I told them this, you know, they go, so you can verify. And I go, yeah, it's already been verified. So right then, they were like, well, let's do it. I go, listen, I'll do it in one situation, one circumstance only. I'm not going to come out and tout a $300 shaft and saying it's got all these features and benefits and it's worth $300. I want to come out and us to be known as a company and a distributor that distributes high performance shaft as good as any shafts in the world at fair and reasonable prices. I don't want to go out there and rape the club makers. I don't want to rape the fitters. I don't want to rape the general public. They go, let's do it. And so we did. And that's the start of the whole thing. Because if you look at it, and that's what I've even gotten away from with the Excaliburs, especially the Mystics and the Avalons. The guys out again, back to the PGA show, they told me to price it up to the moon so they could make money. And I bought into it. Then again, the instinct told me not. And of course, those big guys, because of exposure, back to exposure, they never followed suit in becoming a customer. So now, when we release the Rapid Tapers, we're going to release a whole new Mystic and Avalon line. It's going to get back to the Excalibur days at GolfWorks and what I did pre these new lines, Excalibur exclusives and the Rapid Tapers. We're getting back to those kind of pricing, and we're going to, getting back to what I'm best at. Because when you think about it, I've given seminars at GolfWorks for 4 years in a row on shafts, and I've given them, practically all over the world. And I lay out how shafts were designed on my modeling system, how shafts were designed, and how, I designed them, what I brought into the industry. And I want you to, and there's a cost thing, a cost feature when I'm designing shafts, and I can change, depending on the material, I can change its weight per pound, and it'll all of a sudden calculate the weight in the cost of whatever structure it is. And just to let you know, for a typical, let's say 65 gram shaft, just the material costs, including cosmetics, and the labor costs, that was all burdened into my modeling program. That comes out to about, back in the 90s, $15. Now, the material cost was down in the $5 to $10 range. Now, let's say it gets up to $25, and that's going to be a max of any shaft out there. I don't care if it has the core technology, the Ventus core technology, and I don't care what it is, because it's just, most of that's marketing. There's no way that these shafts are costing, any of these manufacturers more than $20, $25 to make total. Now they got to put their overhead on there, of course, and that can be, tax time. That can be made to look at anything they want. And of course, you've got to make sure they have their villas and where the hell ever. But these $350 shafts, these $500 shafts, a $700 shaft that was just out, they're just they've got the exposure, they've got some tool representation. They can charge whatever they want. But in the final analysis, they don't cost any more than what I'm putting out. There's no way. No way. I'm using the same materials.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the way, they're using Chinese manufacturing too, just like I am.
Yeah.
So the overhead for them is strictly on their company, their advertising budgets and all of that. So, if you can charge it, get it,
But that's not your gig. But that's not your gig.
That's not my gig. That's not my gig. I was at the Matrix booth one time when they had a $500 shaft that came out, and I was in their room and got in early with a good friend of mine from Great Britain, Clive. And we were looking at this really incredible display. They had magnets at both ends of the shafts, and they were floating in the air. And I went, wow, that is cool as hell, And one of the young engineers came up and started. I asked him, I go, so tell me, what makes this a $500 shaft? He went into his marketing spiel, no engineering. And pretty soon I heard over, a friend of mine came in, hey, Robert Arthur, what the heck are you doing here? And he came over, Big Dave, and he came over. I go, Dave, I was just asking your engineer here, what makes these shafts worth $500? I don't think he knew he was talking to him. And he goes, well, you know why they're $500. You started it. I'm like, how did I start it? He goes, the ProLite. I go, how did the ProLite start? He goes, because it was the most expensive shaft out there. I go, I know, it was revolutionary. And we charged, what, $70 for it? He goes, well, but you should know, you started it. I'm like, okay, I'm missing something. He goes, they're worth $500, and I quote, they're worth $500 if somebody will buy them for $500, and people are. And I'm like, well, I can't argue with that. So that's the game we play. That's the game we're in.
Well, yep. I'm glad you're not playing that game so much, though.
Well, I'm not playing it at all. Now I tried to play it for a couple of years, during the pandemic and coming out of it, and I've just been getting so frustrated that it's not to my morals, it's not to the people that are working with me, their morals. We want to do what's right. We got a simple goal, simple goal, and my simple mantra is this: my job is to help people have more fun and not break the bank in doing so. Just have them play this tough little game, hit this little white orb around a little bit better, have more fun. And if I can accomplish that with my designs, well, then I'm one happy camper. That's it, bottom line. Yeah, money will come. I'm not worried about money. I've never been worried about money. Yeah. But it's not my driving force like it is,
for other folks.
A lot of this world.
Well, that's a great way to end today. So, and after all the fun that we got to go back and forth to get this worked out, I appreciate you taking the time. And I'm going to put
no problem. This was fun.
Yeah, well, I'm going to put links in the show notes to Excalibur golf shafts, and
thank you.
Somewhere along the road, I'm going to get one of those 85R shafts, even if they're out of.
There you go. There you go.
We're going to work it out.
One pops up, it'll come to you. But
okay.
You're going to love the new cosmetics. I'll shoot you some. We're going to put them out on Hackers.
Yeah.
And a couple other places for people to review them and vote on them. Well, it's back to what I like to do. Let's let the people tell me if I'm doing my job right.
There you go. Well, hang in for a second, and again, thanks. Appreciate it.
Okay. No problem.
Bye-bye.
My pleasure.
The Golf Improvement Podcast is sponsored by Tony Wright and Game Improvement Golf. Tony creates exceptional golf clubs. You shoot lower scores.
Robin, thanks for taking the time with me to share some of your amazing achievements and how they happened, and also your thoughtful perspectives about the truths about golf shafts and golf shaft designs. I put links in the show notes to where you can find out about Excalibur golf shafts, and in particular about his 3 years in the making Excalibur Rapid Taper iron golf shafts. Yes, these are in my fitting system, and if you want to find out how they can perform for you, get in touch with me. My shout-out today is for the Wedgecraft 12-week short game video lesson series. I'm now into week 10 of this series, and I am beyond impressed at the value and quality of the videos created by PGA professional Lane Savoy and biomechanics expert Dr. Rob Neal. $75 for this series is about the third of the cost of a new wedge, and way worth the investment if you're like me and have struggled with wedge play for so long. The link to Wedgecraft is in the show notes, and it's transforming my wedge game. I get nothing materially from endorsing Wedgecraft except getting to hit more great wedge shots. Well, that's it for today. In 2 weeks, a big announcement, at least I think it is, and I can't wait to share it with you. But until then, take care, God bless the Ukraine, and God bless America.
Game Improvement Golf, your source of information and inspiration to become an exceptional golfer now. www.gameimprovementgolf.com